Hi, and welcome back to Damn Parenting, your English-speaking parenting podcast from Amsterdam, the Netherlands. On today's episode, we are going to be bringing up the topic of HR in your first trimester. The reason we're actually bringing this up is generally because I think maybe it's from like an old school perspective, but women are terrified when they get pregnant in their job.
Terrified, like scared, very badly scared.
Do I get to keep my job? Is my job going to be here when I come back? Am I going to be replaced? Because, women are seen as, oh, you have a kid, you're not going to want to work again, so let's just start phasing you out. This has actually creeped up in quite a lot of WhatsApp conversations on Facebook groups. This is a continuous conversation that is flowing out. And it's awful to read. And it's awful to kind of know that there are people out there who get the joy of being pregnant and then the terrified feeling of, I now have to tell my company. And you just want to enjoy the freedom and the happiness of the whole process, I think. Yeah, so this was a really important topic we felt to come through in the first trimester because it'll help settle any nerves you might have, any anxiety, any questions you might have. And Maren actually knew the perfect person.
Yeah, I got the privilege that my husband actually worked with the person that we're going to be interviewing for today's episode. Her name is Iram, and she worked at the company that my husband came for to the Netherlands, and she was his HR person. I mean, I never got to personally work with her, but passively I got to work with her through my husband, and he always spoke like in the highest tones of her, and he was so happy to give me her contact and said, yes, you should definitely contact her. She's amazing. She will know so much about this. And she also, and you will hear this in the interview, he said she is a person, like a human person who seeks for human connection within the corporate world, and she will be super helpful, I think, for your listeners. And that's why we decided to go with her. Also, because I have never I've never been employed in a company. I've always had my own business. I've always been self-employed. So that was also very interesting for me to hear this perspective of all the procedures and also of all the things that were going on in these conversations. And I was always, when Eva said, these are the questions in the WhatsApp groups, I always felt like an observer, but not really. I never felt this because I never had to deal with these anxiety or like with the fears that come with confronting HR. And now I'm even using the word confronting, and that's the whole gist that I got of it. The whole energy was always like this fear loaded and defense mechanism loaded energy that I got out of these questions that were raised, like, oh, how can I like brace myself for these conversations with HR? What arguments can I prepare instead of going in with an open mind? And how can we make this work as a team?
Yeah, it's the whole idea of me versus them. And It's like, well, you're actually hired by a company, so technically you're a team.
Yeah, exactly. They are you are them, and you are together making this work. And I hope that we got to highlight this with the talk that we had with Iram.
Yeah, so without further ado, let's get into the interview.
This is finally our HR episode for the first trimester. And so for everyone, so this whole episode is going to be, of course, the part of our first trimester series where we will also on the topic of HR. So when you're pregnant, when to tell HR, where to go to, and what the general process is. And we are super, super happy that we have Iram joining us today. Hi, Iram.
Hi, ladies. Good evening.
Hi.
So good to have you. So can you give us a little bit of background? Who are you and what is your background with HR?
Gosh, okay, where to start? So obviously from the accent, you can tell I'm born in the UK. I'm from the north. Diluted the accent over the 20 years that I've been working, 17 of which have been in the Netherlands by chance. So I've been over here for 17 years now. I have 20 years of experience within HR, leadership, recruitment, headhunting, dealt with different kind of nationalities and people working over in the Netherlands who've made the Netherlands their home, but very much focused on working in the corporate world over here now. Currently working for a private equity firm, have also worked for founder-owned alternative fixed income provider, Page Group, perhaps you've heard of, as associate director. So very varied, but very much focused on people, I would say, in a snapshot.
And you are also a mother, right? So most importantly.
Absolutely. That's the full-time job, huh? Going
Yes.
to work's the easy part and having the coffee. But I'm a mother of 3. So I have a daughter, Medi, who's 14, a son, Daniel, who's 10, and my baby, Amara, who is 7.
So all
Wow.
age ranges.
Yeah. Clearly not Dutch, otherwise they would have a 2-year gap max.
Yeah. We will dive right into someone finds out they're pregnant. They have the positive pregnancy test in hand. What to do now? When to inform HR? What is the step they should take? Just walk us through the very easy beginnings of this whole process.
Do you know, I'd say the first thing is it depends on if you're in a large kind of international, well-established brand, or you're in a scaling venture capital, smaller company of kind of max 50, because they have very different approaches in my experience, sorry. For example, if you're with a large company, so when I was with Paige, pregnant, everything was very much defined in a policy. So it was very easy to kind of go speak to HR or download the policy, get an idea of what's happening. And normally, you know, your verloskundige over here in the Netherlands, who's kind of like your midwife, will also give you some hints and tips on when the best time is to kind of tell HR. But normally you would inform HR when it's safe, you know, when you know that the pregnancy is safe. It's around 12-week scan, you've had your first scan, you know everything's okay, and then you kind of formally let your manager or HR know. But obviously, as we all know, and I'm sure Maria, you know as well, you've also got a daughter, if the sickness kicks in and the tiredness and the nausea, it becomes a little bit of a kind of red flag, I think. Anyway, it just feels so much more obvious than perhaps it does to the employer. And I would say listen to your body. Obviously, again, I'm not a doctor, but number one priority is for you to keep safe, and if you need to rest and sleep, you need to call in sick because you are not well to do your role, and you need to look, I don't feel well, I'm going to be off, hopefully I'll feel better, and take that time. And then obviously when it's confirmed, it makes more sense to your employer that, you know, they were probably due to the pregnancy. But I think a lot of us feel guilty, and a lot of us tend to feel a little bit nervous about how to formally do this, but ultimately you've got to listen to your body. So I would say if it's a large established international firm, normally there's a policy, everything is clearly defined. Now, the companies that I've worked for recently are a lot more smaller, but a lot more human. And what you tend to find is you can approach your manager when it's a little bit early and say, look, I'm pregnant, feel unwell. You know, normally in best practice to share at 12 weeks, but if you feel like like you're having some negative symptoms of the pregnancy, I would say approach that human in your office, which is probably HR or your manager, and just kind of say, look, I just want to be really honest with you. I'm pregnant. It's a little bit of a tough one right now. Hopefully going to feel better in a couple of weeks, but just want to be open with you. So, and if it was kind of the firm I'm working for right now, or ones I've worked for in the past, we would say, look, come in when you feel okay to come in, and leave a little bit earlier, because every day, you know, it's ups and downs, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I think you need to be lucky enough to have an employer that understands. There's a very different way of doing it in a large firm. Is a very much of a hands-on, a human, is it? Yeah, maybe human's not the right word, but a bit more flexibility.
Yeah.
I've seen in kind of like the private equity or venture capital space, because there's also such a keen focus right now to keep female talents and diverse talents, that they are open to listening. And larger companies, you know, it's difficult to have that personal approach. But in today's world, I really believe that many managers are leading more with kind of empathy and human side, etc. So I think the key thing is, if you feel well, tell them at 12 weeks. If you don't feel well and, you know, it just doesn't feel right, you and your baby and your body's number one.
Yeah.
And you need to speak to someone at her in the office and just say, probably HR or manager, and just say, just want to be really honest with you. And they'd probably appreciate that honesty.
So you're saying an in-person, like one-on-one, is actually the best way to actually proceed with the formal announcement, as it were?
Absolutely. I think it's important. I mean, hopefully you've been there a while, or more than likely, you know, if you've been there a while, you know who you kind of go-to senior person is, your manager, I hope, or HR if it's a smaller company. And again, at my experience at Page, for example, which is a huge global executive recruitment firm, is I'd go to my manager and say, look, you probably can see it in my face, I feel awful, I'm pregnant. We have a joke about it. And then they say, okay, well, look, at this week, 12 weeks, it's great to send us a formal email to let us know, and hopefully everything's okay, and that kind of approach. And in a smaller firm, I'm in my experience, there've been people who've come forward a lot earlier because they've just not felt well. And, it's my responsibility then as as someone who wants to be progressive in the HR space, or show that we're a progressive company, to say, we're human. We understand, your body's going through quite some changes right now. We want to retain you. Go home and rest, and let's speak to you on Monday and see how you feel, and kind of keep it open. Because the way I see it, and I'm sure there's a lot of HR people hopefully who are listening to this, or mums to be, is if you're a solid employee, if you're a hard worker, nobody wants to lose you. And everybody knows that when pregnancy kicks in, your body's not your body. Something else is taken over here, and they will take care of you. The experiences I have is that, they'll take care of you. I think it gets tricky when you've been there a short period of time, or if you're on a 1-year contract, and that's when kind of people feel a bit more nervous. And then, of course, you follow more kind of the protocol of 12 weeks, I'm going to inform them, and you try your best to show yourself to extend that 1-year contract. But again, perhaps it's easy for me to say, but it's a job. And number one, obviously, is your health. And what I wouldn't want is any woman or anyone having a child to hear this and think that, pushing yourself to the extent when you're not feeling well when you're pregnant is just an absolute no. And any company that would expect that is just not a great employer.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's great to hear that from a HR person, that you really prioritize the health and well-being of the female. And it's great to hear as well that there's a huge focus on the female and diversity sector, like that people are trying to, retain them. So, I mean, it's great to hear. I do know that there's a lot of conversations out there on WhatsApp groups about people being nervous. They're on their first contract, as you say, or they're in a small company. And so they're very nervous, and they're just seeking, confirmation. Like, can I stay here? Like, am I risking myself here? And it's such an awful thing to be in such an amazing position in life of being pregnant, but then having that terror and that feeling of, oh God, my job.
Yeah. That's quite upsetting to hear that that's still a thing. I would have thought that companies have moved forward, but I think, ultimately, perhaps it's easy for me to say because I've had 3 kids and I have the experience to go with it now, and I'm a lot more comfortable with saying things directly. But I think number one is, if you are, a great employee, they're not going to want to lose you. They're not going to want to lose you. Yes, on a 1-year contract, it's different. So, I mean, obviously, if it's not planned and you start a new year, could you wait until you're almost a year? I would do that. So then you get all the benefits, of course. And let's be honest, they're nice benefits, to have kind of 16 weeks mat leave and take 4 to 6 weeks off before your expected due date, and then have 100% pay while you're off. These are things that you're eligible for if you're on a permanent contract, and why not? If you're planning a pregnancy and can wait a month or 2, why not? You're secure financially. But if not, it's a job. And if you're, dedicated and hardworking, you'd rather find something knowing that you took time to be healthy and happy during your pregnancy, and then find something else, because guess what? It's their loss.
Yeah.
And they're clearly not a very progressive company, or a very, empathetic, or have a great leadership team, if they're not taking care of you when you're pregnant. That really is a signal for me. It's a real signal, because in the HR space now, there's so much talk about leading with empathy and, humanizing policies and procedures and listening to your people. We do employee engagement surveys to make sure we're looking at where we're going wrong with things. And again, even now, 2023, men and women want to have clearer guidelines, like what's possible if I fall pregnant, and what if I feel sick, and what if I, because it's still a thing now. But I think the people that I meet in the HR space are so kind of forward thinking and progressive that we will listen, and we want to retain those talents. That's my experience.
So refreshing to hear. And I'm so happy to hear all what you're saying, because I'm sure that a lot of listeners out there feel so much, like you said, guilt and fear among this. And then hear you say, really a reminder, it is a job. Full stop. And your health and your baby and your family should be on the first priority. Of course, a job provides for your life, but at the same time, it's not your life, right? So that makes me so happy to hear you say that, and also that you're saying that you're seeing more change in the HR world, and you speak to other people and that you feel there is slightly change, and just in this whole fear mongering is not at the level that it was and should not be at the ever again at this level.
No. And, I'm going to say something that might be a bit controversial here, so feel free to clip me out, but women worry so much more than men. It's unbelievable. And women, we make things so much bigger in our minds than a man would if they were pregnant.
Yeah.
And I see it in the office. I see men taking paternity leave, but they don't make it a big deal. They block their agenda. I mean, legally they're allowed a week, but they'll add on extra holidays. They'll block it for 4 weeks and they're off. And a woman who's eligible for that maternity leave and also is not feeling well will hesitate and build up the kind of self-guilt.
Yeah.
And, I don't belong here. I'm not good enough because I'm pregnant now and I'm not showing myself. You are pregnant, and it's that kind of reminder of, this is a different conversation perhaps, but speak to yourself positively. You are pregnant. A human is growing inside you. There are going to be things that you experience that are not the most pleasant, and you can't be as functional as you normally would or as productive as you normally would, but it's temporary. But number one is your health. I mean, where I work now, we have a meditation room. We have a room where new mothers have a private room to express milk. These are things that you never had kind of when I was pregnant with my daughter. Just the thought of it is just impossible. And now you can give your baby breast milk or mother milk, whatever you call it nowadays, because there are these rooms and because they have to give you 2 hours during your working hours to express baby milk. I mean, this is progression, so that you don't have to have that guilty mother feeling. If you choose to breastfeed, how am I going to do this? My kid's in the creche. You can express. They have special fridges in the express room for you to keep your milk to give baby later, and then you don't have that guilty feeling. Well, that's amazing. That's absolutely amazing that that's possible nowadays.
Yeah, I think there has been changes. I've seen that actually in a few places, but it's not everywhere, unfortunately. Yeah. And I think that's where all these voices are really, sending messages out like, I just got this new job, or I've just got a promotion, or I've just been hired, whatever it is. And it's just, you're completely right. I mean, there is a women guilt. Yeah, I'm going to lose my job, absolute fear of everything because of the position we're in. So I completely agree with you on that. And I just wish we could be stronger together to be able to,
But that's why we're having these conversations. So we're talking about this and people can listen to it, and hopefully someone feels empowered. And you said you can clip me out. Oh no, I will amplify what you said. I will do the exact opposite, because I want everyone to hear this. I want everyone to feel, like you said, confident and strong and standing up for themselves. And it's very refreshing to hear that this is possible in some places, and we're moving in the right direction in small steps.
I'm not, for example, from Horeca. What's Horeca? So, the food industry, or, people working in coffee houses and, those kind of companies. I can imagine that they physically need somebody to stand there, and, that's a different sector. So I can only go off, obviously, my experiences in recruiting or executive search or finance roles or typical banking roles, private equity, those kind of roles. And even there, people in the PE space or venture capital, Mary, you'll know because your husband's kind of in that world as well. They can work long hours.
Yeah.
And, for men, okay, they can commit to certain hours and then they go home and then it's family time. But if you're a mother or if you're pregnant, it's really taxing. And they then lose females. What happens then? Large investors are interested in doing business with you. They want to see your diversity statistics, and they think, wow, 2% of females in senior leadership positions, and you only hired 1 female last year. What's your plan? How are you going to retain females? Well, females normally at a certain age want to have babies. Not all, but some do. And, that biologically it's possible. They decide they want a child. In the Netherlands, typically, a lot of it's on the woman. A lot of this is on, the woman to take care of kids. And why not? It's a beautiful thing. But then to have an employer who makes it easier, to make it a bit more smoother, to encourage you to go back to work where, hey, I get some time for myself, but I'm still a mother. I mean, then you've got that golden balance. But again, we're in the right direction, but we're absolutely not there yet.
Mm. And is there anything that you say can help smooth this transition during the maternity, paternity leave to ensure there's minimal disruption for the team, for the workflow? Is there anything that you've seen in practice where you said, this is a good tip, or this is something you might want to plan for, or this is something to keep an eye on?
I think, if you're lucky enough to have kind of a healthy pregnancy, which I wish everyone has, tell HR and your manager at 12 weeks, I'm really happy to tell you I'm pregnant. You tell your manager in person, personalize it, smile, tell them you're happy. You really want to make sure that before you leave, everything is taken care of as best as you can. A great employee, taking care, ownership, that kind of thing. But, if you're not feeling well, you'd be able to reach out to them and just keep things as honest as possible. I think, if they feel that you're being honest, but yet you're still on it and committed, it's a different kind of tone. So if I've got someone come to me saying, Iram, I love my job, absolutely committed to the company and to you guys, but I'm pregnant, I would be over the moon. And they would, and if they said, look, I'm going to make a plan so that, before I disappear 4 weeks, you'll already know who I'm handing over my projects to, or we can hire a contractor to fill in for those weeks, work with me, think with me in solutions. It's not a problem that you're pregnant, but bring some solutions. So you might be, for example, I go back to the coffee house and someone who could potentially need that job, or, could work part-time, and say, look, I even have a suggestion of someone if you want to meet them next week. This is owning your pregnancy, including retaining your job. And, really, provided everything's healthy, absolutely looking forward to coming back after my maternity leave. And let's keep in touch. WhatsApp me, let me know what's happening. If I don't respond, I will when I get time. And that way you're keeping the link to kind of knowing what's going on in the space or what's happening. And again, I'm assuming that this isn't a kind of formal professional services company, more kind of catering type. That example really sticks to mind, but also for finance roles, if you're in admin, or you're in PE or VC, whatever you want to call it, if you've got we have HR systems that give you updates and let you know what's going on. It's just nice to give a quick smiley. You don't have to disappear if you don't want to, or someone celebrated successful news, just to send a reply saying currently on mat leave, but really this is great news, smiley. You keep a bit connected. They feel that you're keen to get back, and you decide. It's not that you have to, but I think it's nice to kind of tell them, and then help them with the plan of what should happen next while you're away, kind of almost like owning it. Tell them some recruiters who could help fill the position temporarily, and you make a joke saying, but I'm going to be back after my mat leave. And it's just that positivity, owning it. Everybody loves the personality in the office. We live in turbulent times. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of negativity. And quite frankly, having positive people in the office or in a workspace, these are keepers, in my opinion.
One thing that just came to my mind when you were talking about this, and this keeping the connection, keeping the link, keeping it personal, really brought the idea of viewing as we are a team. How can we make this work? Because in I've never been employed in a company because I've always been self-employed, but in my mind, it was always the pregnant lady and the HR or the company, they're against each other. So she's fearful and they want her out. This was always my kind of, this is the energy that's there. But the way you describe it is really this, hey, I'm part of your team. You're my lead. How can we make this work? How can we be a team in this whole experience? And when the mothers feel welcome, that they have a space to be there and they have a right to be there, then they will respond with a smiley and they will want to keep engaged because they are in a welcoming space instead of I have to be fearful and I cannot talk to them and it's a fight and I have to fight for everything. And so this is very beautiful to hear from me, that shifting this energy towards we are a team, we're in this together. How can we make this work?
Yeah.
So if we circle back to the partner side of things, so the person who's not pregnant, can you let us know what are the steps for paternity leave and when they should contact HR?
That's a really good question. That's actually a really good question. I mean, paternity leave is still a little bit of a grey area, right? So we still have the egos and the masculinity, and men find it a lot harder to kind of own this than women, I would say, because obviously they're not holding the baby. I'm ashamed to say legally they only actually have 5 days. So it's 5 working days the last time I checked, which was very recently. So they get kind of a week. But again, because I'm in a small entrepreneurial company, we decide and we humanize it. And I'm lucky to be able to give someone in this situation, healthy pregnancy, partner's doing well, they tend to take it after the birth. So they take a week immediately after. They'll extend it with some holidays, or what a lot of the guys are doing nowadays, fathers, they will take, for example, this week, maybe a day every week to have that hands-on day with baby. But of course, they have a certain type of parental leave as well, where they can take it per week. Now, I need to double check how that works exactly, but there is somebody who we have right now who has a Friday off, and he gets paid 70% of his salary, and he will continue to do so till his child is 2 years old. But that's the way he's kind of worked out what works for him. I think larger institutional companies, large global firms, or companies that, 250 plus, they will have a clear paternity policy. And even before you're going to have a child, there is no harm having a look at what benefits you have at a company. So, there's people that we've hired who are already, where I work right now, there are men and women who are in their mid-20s. I mean, these people don't want children yet, but they're already asking me, what does the paternity leave look like? What's the maternity leave look like? Because these are seen as, firstly, a reason to join a company if they're pretty promising, or a company's progressive enough to have a solid maternity policy. That says a lot. But these people are already asking, what does it look like? And 5 years ago, it was just kind of, you're in that situation and then you scatter around and try and work out what the policies look like. When you join a company, have a look at the maternity policy, have a look at the paternity policy. If there isn't one, there's no harm in saying, hey, do you do that? Or how does that work? I'm not planning on anything right now. But even if I was, it's good to know. Ask these questions, ask the recruiters, ask the headhunters, what do these things look like? I think nowadays people do tend to plan their pregnancies a lot more than perhaps way back. And there's absolutely no harm in, when you're applying for jobs, to look at those things already. Is this company progressive? Are they going to take care of me if I decide to have a family? What kind of policies do they have? And same for your partners. Get them to have a look. Say, look, we clearly want to have children in the next year, or in the next 2 years, 3 years. What's your employer's policy like? Let's kind of work this out, so that we don't have to worry about, finances and employment contracts when it's a time where you want to stay happy and healthy for your baby and enjoy that time. Be a bit more pragmatic, a bit more proactive, do your research, go onto the intranets. If you're going for a new position before you're pregnant, look at what policies they have. When are you eligible for it? And if that means planning, your pregnancy 6 months later, but then you're taken care of, is that a bad thing? I don't think so.
When you're talking about letting for the males to know, or the partner, should I say, to know when to inform their managers, you were saying like, okay, there's the machoism, or there's, that kind of identity. Are they obliged to inform their company by a certain date, or?
No, not in the early stages. I mean, normally my experience is the minute they can't keep it to themselves anyway, the minute they know that pregnancy's safe, they tell us. And then we kind of congratulate them. And this is a great thing. Smaller companies, you probably know the partner, but there isn't like a legal obligation. I think if they want that week, it needs to be when baby's born, to be honest. I really do think there isn't really a clear policy on when you need to inform. I think there is a duty of care, or the kind of a responsibility where you think, okay, it's a couple of months or a month before baby's due, I'll tell them. I find that quite weird that, you've got a colleague, and we're talking about, working together and getting to your colleagues, and then they spring it on you that in a month they're going to be a father. I find that kind of weird. The experience I have is the men that I've worked with whose partners are having babies, or wives, girlfriends, partners are having babies, they tell us when it's safe. And they're like, look, great news. So-and-so's pregnant, really excited. And then we're like, oh, okay. And, are you going to be taking any leave? We encourage you to at least take the early stages. It's such a special moment. And they take it, but they're still a little bit unsure of what's possible. And that's why, again, have a look at the policies when you're in a larger firm, and if it's a smaller firm, have a look around at what the other fathers are doing. There's pretty young papas flying around. What are they doing? Are they working less hours? Are they working? Are they taking longer periods off? And you get a gist of what's normal at the firm. And my advice to anyone, who's planning on having a baby in the next, 2 to 3 years, look at what company you want to join, what kind of paternity, maternity leave they have. Speak to recruiters, horrible people, but they know a lot. I'm an ex-recruiter, I can say that. People, they will help you. They will say, oh, if you want to have children, don't go there, don't work in trading or don't work here. But those kind of firms that look very male dominated are so keen to keep female talents. They really are. So, trading, private equity, venture capital firms, they traditionally only attract men. Engineering firms, the tech space, and they are pretty progressive now because they want to keep those women in the industry, in their firms. So do your research, check on the intranets, ask recruiters. If you're already in the firm and you think, you know what, probably going to really want to have a child in the next couple of years, look at the policies, look around you if there isn't a formal policy, and there's no harm. But again, perhaps I'm being naive, but in the firms I've worked with, if someone came and said, look, don't worry, I'm not pregnant, let's go for sushi and beers, but in the next 2 years, I'm probably thinking about, might be considering it. It's not a hard yes, it's not a hard no. And how would you take care of what do we do for paternity leave? What do you do for maternity leave? And, just ask that question. I think it's really important to do research.
Well, I was very glad that my husband had you as the HR person because I know that he was always saying, well, Iram said I should do this. Iram said I have to take this leave. Iram said it's like, yes, good. Iram encourages you to take leave because my husband is someone who has a very hard time doing this. And I was very happy that you were on the other end of this conversation and we're telling him this, you are not allowed in the office. You have to go out and I don't want to see you until this time. So I hope everyone out there that you will have as a wonderful HR person as Iram is in your team, because I can speak from personal experience. It makes such a difference if you have someone who supports you from the company, who also tells you what you're eligible for and tells you all this and says, hey, if we can tweak this and this, then we can get this out of this. Or if we change your contract this way, or if we change that way, you really try to push the max out of what's possible. And I was being the partner of someone employed in this company, I was so thankful that you had these options and gave them to my husband, and you encouraged him to really take the full picture and really take what's possible.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, it's going back to that thing. I mean, your husband, very positive vibe to have around the office, super excited about his wife having a baby. I mean, we heard all about Miranda.
Oh, yes.
That's why I said yes to this podcast. I think we've met once, right?
Yes.
But I knew everything about Miranda. I knew what she wanted to eat and where they were flying to and their first this and their first. I mean, this is someone who, likes to share, and he's so happy. He's a great guy to have around anyway, but he's also a high achiever, right? So this guy is a super high achiever, very critical, extremely hardworking and dedicated. And then you need someone to say, listen, go home, because there's no stop button with certain people who are high achievers, especially. Go home. And then to hear that was appreciated is good to hear, because at that point you're like the annoying motherly big sister person saying, go home, person, go home. So that's good to hear. But I think, it pays back dividends. It really, really does. If you take care of the mothers or the fathers in these times when it's super sensitive, there's a lot of emotion, you're going to retain talent. You're going to get that back in terms of engagement and commitment and hard work. I believe that if you show the human side, people remember, and people want to stick around with a company that rocks in that way.
Absolutely. I think you've really given us quite a round 360 of different approaches, especially like the fact that I know you're in the corporate world, but you're also touching on to like Horeca, which, a lot of people are in different industries here working for global internationals and equally startups like yourself. So I think you've really given a lot of food for thought on this topic. So we greatly appreciate it. And I'm sure there's a lot of people now wondering where you're working so that they can reach out to you, knowing how supportive you are as a HR person, and that it's not a terrifying position that, we should be scared to go and share such wonderful news with, and the fact that you'll celebrate it with us and take care of us to ensure that we actually, are doing the best we can, be it the whichever partner it is. So thank you so much for joining us.
You're very welcome, ladies. I was
on Parenting. Hopefully, who knows? people listening to this podcast might actually be coming up to you going, hey, I just heard you.
Oh, can you imagine? Famous. Finally. Finally. No,
you're famous.
Thank you again. And I jumped at the chance because I've been there. So if this helps just that one person, I'm happy. Have a great evening, ladies.
You too.
Care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
That was actually a really eye-opening kind of chat, I think. It was so nice.
Eye-opening.
Yeah, it was so nice to hear from Iram, and the fact that she's really coming in from such a human perspective. And that you're not just another number in your company, but you're actually seen as you're part of our team. You really are part of the team. You know, we're going to make this work. And for me, my learning from that is actually the whole idea. And it's actually something my professor said back in the olden days. It was a case of you can come to me with any problem, any situation, whatever it is, but come with a solution in hand. And so hearing her say that, it just reminded me back then, I was like, oh yeah, like that's true. If everything can be worked out, just try and come up with a solution. It doesn't have to be perfect or work, but just come up with some suggestions to be part of it.
And it's such a nice invitation for a conversation, you know, and that was the nice thing for me to hear from her, that she said, let's sit at the table and I present my options that I have for you. And I want to hear the options that you think you have for me or you think you can bring to the table. And then let's put this together. So that was really nice for me to hear, that it's not, I'm going to try to pull you in my reality and you're going to put me in your reality, but let's create a third option here. Let's create something that we both contributed to the solution and we both created something that we equally had part in and works for both of us. And we both had to go towards the other person. You know, it wasn't like you come to my side, I come to your side, but let's meet in the middle and let's see how we can now walk together. And that's what I also said in the interview or like in the talk with Iram, that when you have this atmosphere, then you are more willing to still be engaged, although you're out. And then you are willing to reply with a thumbs up or a smiley or great to hear or whatever. But if you're already annoyed and you're with this energy of like, oh my God, I'm glad I'm out now, and I don't want to hear anything from them. I don't want to be involved in anything because it's giving me so much stress and anxiety and I can't deal with this right now, which is totally understandable. If you don't create the situation in the first place by really working together towards, I mean, you have a couple months to work towards your maternity leave. It's not you become pregnant, you tell them, and next day you're gonna be gone. But it's this whole months and months of process that you can work together towards a good solution and towards a good maternity leave feeling, where you really also want to be still engaged with your team, although of course you're super engaged with your baby and all the stuff that comes with that, but you also can still enjoy or have this part of your work personality there, and this can still be also a part of you, the rest of your personality. And I think that was really nice for me to hear, that how to create this environment and how to create this atmosphere together.
Yeah, I think the one thing she was also pointing out, like, which was a great side there, was, you know, she's coming from one specific sector or industry, and she was addressing like HoReCa, for example. I think a lot of us like move over here job related, or there's something, you know, there's a reason we come over, and so we're working on that company. So usually they might be pretty big companies. So they, you know, they should have a really good HR department. And so, you know, you should be feeling a bit confident. For the others who, you know, have found another job, or, you know, at the end of the day, you know, you should kind of be already in contact with your HR. You should kind of know the ins and outs. And as Iram said, like, you know, ask the questions, check the policies, see what's happening. Even if you're in a startup or whatever it is, you know, you've got every right. And yeah, I was just kind of like, I hope it spreads out, you know, that everyone kind of can take something from this, from whatever industry or sector or the scale up or the global companies are out there. So
yeah. And of course, we know that hearing this, Iram is really like a very good example of how things should be run and how a person should react when you come to them. I hope that some of you recognize your own HR department in what she said. And even if you don't, then maybe this can be an inspiration for you to get ideas how to come to your HR department in the future and how to maybe prepare a talk with them or get some, just some points to take into the conversation with them from something that you've heard on this episode.
So with that, we hope this provided you some information, some insight, and hopefully a calmer feeling of entering into this amazing period of pregnancy, and that you will feel more comfortable going into work and to share the news with everyone. So thank you, Iram. And this has been your host, Eva.
And Maren.
This has been Damn Parenting. And until next time, enjoy these beautiful moments of the first trimester.
Bye.
Bye.